Someone bumps into you, and you say sorry. A meeting runs long, and you're 2 minutes late. Not because you were careless, but because the previous one didn't end on time. You apologize anyway. Someone is in a bad mood, a mood that has nothing to do with you, that existed before you walked in, that would exist whether you were there or not, and you feel responsible. Not just uncomfortable, responsible. Like something you did or didn't do, or failed to be is the reason the air in the room feels wrong. And so you adjust, soften your voice. Choose your words more carefully. Find a small way to make it better, even though you didn't make it worse. You've probably noticed this about yourself. Maybe you've even joked about it. I apologize for apologizing too much. But underneath the self-awareness, there's something that isn't funny at all. Because this pattern, this reflexive reaching for blame before anyone has assigned it, is quietly shaping the way you move through the world, and it started somewhere, not in a personality trait, not in a character flaw, in something your nervous system learned about what it meant to take up space and what happened when you did it wrong. Let's look at what this actually costs you. Because it isn't just the words. The apology is the surface. Underneath it is a continuous, exhausting process of monitoring, scanning every room you enter for signs of displeasure, reading every shift in someone's tone for evidence of your fault, pre-apologizing in your mind before anyone has said a word. You do it so automatically that most of the time you don't notice it's happening. You just feel the vague, low-level anxiety that something might be wrong, that someone might be disappointed, that you may have taken up slightly more space than you were allocated. And so you shrink. Not dramatically, incrementally, a slightly smaller opinion in a group setting, a hesitation before expressing a preference, a qualifier added to every strong statement so that no one will find it too much. Sorry, this might be a stupid question. I don't know if this is right, but sorry to bother you with this. Each one alone is minor. Together, across a day, a week, a year, they construct a version of you that is always slightly less than what you actually are. And the people around you receive that version. They don't know there's more, because the more never quite makes it out without being wrapped in apology first. This affects your relationships in specific ways. It makes genuine conflict nearly impossible, because before a disagreement can form, you've already begun absorbing fault. It creates a subtle imbalance where the people in your life learn, without being told, that they can be in a bad mood around you and it will be managed, that their discomfort will be treated as your responsibility. And over time, some of them take that without questioning it, not because they're cruel, because you offered it consistently, automatically, before they even asked. It also creates something harder to name, a growing uncertainty about your own perceptions. When you've spent years defaulting to probably my fault, when your first response to friction is always to look inward for cause, you begin to lose confidence in your own read of situations. You second-guess your discomfort. Dismiss your boundaries before they've fully formed. Explain away things that deserve to be felt. And the self-talk that runs underneath all of it. Am I being too sensitive? Did I cause this? Why can't I just be easier? That self-talk is not honesty. It is the echo of something you were taught before you had the language to question it. Here is what this pattern is not. It is not weakness. It is not a neurotic personality. It is not proof that something is fundamentally wrong with you. It is a survival adaptation, a highly refined, socially intelligent response to an environment that, at some point in your life, made it clear that conflict was dangerous, that someone's displeasure had consequences, that the safest position was always slightly behind yourself, always slightly apologetic, always slightly ready to absorb the fault before it could be assigned. Children who grow up in environments where the emotional temperature of a room is unpredictable, where a parent's mood could shift without warning, where love could feel conditional on behavior, where being too much or too loud or too needy produced a response that felt like rejection. Those children learn to read rooms with extraordinary precision. They develop a sensitivity to emotional cues that borders on hypervigilance. And they learn to move preemptively, to apologize before the accusation, to shrink before the correction, to manage the space they occupy with constant, careful attention. That learning kept something intact. It kept the relationship, kept the peace, kept the love available, even when it required continuous performance to access. You were not weak, you were adaptive. The problem is that the adaptation is still running, in rooms that don't require it, with people who never set those conditions. In a life that is asking you to take up space while your nervous system is still apologizing for existing. What you're experiencing has a name in trauma-informed psychology: the fawn response. Coined by therapist Pete Walker, the fawn response is the fourth survival strategy, alongside fight, flight, and freeze that the nervous system deploys under threat. Where fight pushes back and flight escapes. The fawn response moves toward appeasement, toward placation, toward making the threatening person feel comfortable enough that the threat resolves. In acute danger, this is extraordinarily functional, softening someone's anger before it peaks, absorbing blame to de-escalate a situation, making yourself small, agreeable, easy, until the danger passes. But the fawn response, like all threat responses, is not activated by logic. It is activated by pattern recognition, by the nervous system detecting cues that match the original threatening environment: raised voices, cold silence, certain tones, certain expressions, the specific texture of someone else's displeasure. And when it fires, when the cue is detected, the response runs, not as a choice, as a reflex. Now layer on the neuroscience of chronic hypervigilance. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, is designed to learn from emotional experience, particularly early emotional experience. In environments where someone else's emotional state consistently required management, the amygdala forms what researchers call a sensitized threat template, a hair-trigger detection system specifically calibrated to signs of interpersonal displeasure. This template doesn't update automatically when circumstances change. It persists. It generalizes. It begins applying its detection to situations that don't warrant it. A colleague's quiet day becomes a sign of your failure. A partner's distraction becomes evidence of your inadequacy. Silence in a conversation becomes something you need to fill quickly before it becomes an indictment. Here is the metaphor. Imagine a smoke detector that was calibrated in a house where small fires happened often. In that house, it was essential. The sensitivity was the point. But then you moved. The new house doesn't have fires. But the detector didn't come with a recalibration manual. So it sounds for steam from a kettle, for candles, for a little too much warmth in the kitchen. And every time it sounds, you respond, because the last house taught you the consequence of ignoring it. The detector isn't broken. It is precisely, faithfully doing exactly what it was built to do. The simple mental model: your nervous system is a threat detector calibrated to an old environment. The apologizing isn't weakness. It's the detector going off in a room that no longer requires the alarm. Here are 5 principles for working with this pattern, each grounded in the psychology of the fawn response: nervous system regulation and identity reconstruction. The fawn response is a reflex, fast, automatic, preconscious. By the time you notice you've apologized, it's already happened. The intervention isn't to stop the apology. It's to insert a moment of awareness before the reflex fully executes. What to do? When you feel the impulse to apologize, particularly in situations where no harm has clearly been done, pause for 2 to 3 seconds before speaking. Not to suppress the apology. To ask one question: did I actually do something wrong here? Why it works. This brief pause activates the prefrontal cortex, the brain's evaluative center, before the amygdala's reflexive response has fully bypassed it. Research on impulse regulation by psychologist Walter Mischel shows that even a short delay between impulse and action significantly increases the likelihood of a chosen, rather than automatic, response. You are inserting a moment of agency into a process that currently runs without one. Real-life example: someone seems short with you in a message. The impulse fires. What did I do? I should apologize. You pause. 2 seconds. 3. You ask, is there actual evidence I caused this? Often there isn't. Often the message was short because they were busy. And in that pause, you let it be their mood, not your fault. One of the most important distinctions for people with a fawn response pattern is the difference between feeling what someone else feels and being responsible for what someone else feels. Both involve awareness of another's emotional state. Only one of them requires you to fix it. What to do? When you notice yourself absorbing someone else's mood, when their irritation, sadness, or tension is beginning to feel like your problem to solve, practice naming the distinction explicitly. I can feel that they're upset. That doesn't mean I caused it. I notice this discomfort in the room. It isn't mine to carry. Why it works. This is a boundary-setting practice rooted in what psychotherapist Nedra Tolwab calls emotional boundary formation, the cognitive separation of empathy from enmeshment. Naming the distinction activates the prefrontal cortex's narrative-making function, which helps regulate the amygdala's automatic absorption response. You are not becoming less empathetic. You are becoming more precise about what empathy requires of you. Real-life example: your partner comes home visibly stressed. Old pattern. Immediate scanning for cause, quiet apology for the atmosphere, adjustment of your own behavior to smooth the space. New practice. I see they're stressed. I can be present without being responsible for the stress. You offer warmth, genuinely. But you don't absorb the weather as evidence of your failure. The fawn response's deepest fear is not that you've done something wrong. It's that someone's displeasure will persist, that the discomfort won't resolve, that the relationship will be damaged by your failure to fix it. The recovery from this pattern requires building tolerance for exactly that discomfort. What to do? Practice allowing someone's displeasure to exist without immediately moving to resolve it. Not with cruelty, not with indifference. Simply without automatic intervention. Let someone be in a difficult mood. Let a silence exist without filling it. Let a moment of tension pass without an apology you didn't owe. Why it works. This is systematic desensitization, the gradual reduction of a conditioned fear response, through repeated, tolerated exposure. Research on anxiety treatment consistently shows that the fear of unresolved tension decreases significantly when the expected catastrophe, rejection, loss of love, punishment, repeatedly fails to materialize. The nervous system updates through evidence. Real-life example: a friend is quiet over dinner. You sit with the quiet. You don't fill it with apology or excessive warmth. You simply remain present and wait. Eventually they say, "Sorry, long day," and nothing needed fixing. Because nothing was broken. People deep in a fawn response pattern often lose access to simple, direct preference expression. Everything becomes qualified. Every want gets softened into a suggestion. Every need gets pre-apologized into near invisibility. Reclaiming direct language, not aggressive, just honest, is a concrete act of nervous system recalibration. What to do? Practice stating one preference per day, without a qualifier, a hedge, or an apology attached to it. Not sorry, this might be weird, but could we maybe possibly just, I'd like to go there, or I prefer this, or I need a few minutes. Why it works. Language shapes self-perception. Research by psychologist James Pennebaker on language and identity shows that the words we use to describe ourselves and our needs directly influence how our brain represents our own agency and worth. Direct language, practiced repeatedly, begins to reconstruct the internal model from someone who is always apologizing for existing to someone who is simply, quietly, allowed to be here. Real-life example. Someone asks where you want to eat. Old response. Oh, I don't mind, wherever you want. Honestly, anything is fine. New response. I'd actually love that place on the corner. Simple, unqualified. And you stay with the slight discomfort of having expressed something plainly until the discomfort passes. And it always does. The pattern has a specific origin, not as a thought, as a felt sense of a particular environment, a particular person, a particular emotional atmosphere that first taught you that someone else's mood was your responsibility. You don't need to relive it, you just need to locate it. What to do? Find a quiet moment and ask yourself honestly, when did I first learn that taking up space had a cost? Whose displeasure did I learn to manage? What happened, even subtly, when I stopped managing it? You're not looking for a dramatic answer. You're looking for the room where the detector was calibrated. Why it works. Schema therapy research by Jeffrey Young and Arnaud Arntz consistently shows that identifying the developmental origin of a behavioral pattern reduces its automatic authority in present-day situations. Understanding that the rule was written for a specific context, one that no longer exists, weakens its claim on your current behavior. The past doesn't disappear, but it stops being mistaken for the present. Real-life example. You realize the pattern traces back to a parent whose moods were unpredictable, whose silence meant something, whose tone meant something, whose displeasure required management before it could escalate. You were very young. You were very good at reading the room. And being good at it kept something intact. You hold that understanding not as blame, but as context, as the explanation for why a detector built in that house is still going off in this one. Here's the model to carry. Your nervous system is a smoke detector calibrated in an old house. It fires, not because you're broken, not because you're weak, but because it was built with extraordinary precision for an environment that required it. The work now is recalibration, not silencing the detector, not pretending the old house didn't exist. Learning slowly through evidence, through practice, what the new house actually requires. Pause before the reflex. Separate empathy from responsibility. Tolerate the discomfort of unresolved tension. Speak your preferences plainly. Locate the room where the rule was written, not as a performance of confidence, as a quiet, steady process of teaching your nervous system that the danger it learned to manage is no longer the danger you're living in. You have spent a long time making yourself easier to be around, smaller, softer, pre-apologized, and some of the people in your life have grown so accustomed to that version of you that they may not even notice when it changes. But you will. The first time you let someone's mood exist without taking responsibility for it, you will feel the discomfort of not fixing something that wasn't yours to fix. The first time you say what you want without softening it into near nothingness, you will feel exposed in a way that is new and strange. That exposure is not danger. That exposure is just honesty. The sensation of being present in a room as yourself, fully, without the advance apology. You were never too much. You were never the cause of every difficult atmosphere you walked into. You were just someone who learned very early to act as though you were, and who was so good at that performance that even you forgot it was one. The apologies you owe the world are few, and none of them are for simply being here.